Good morning. Thanks, Jim. So I thought I had a pretty cool video, but then after I saw Adam and Fabio's, I think I'd be disappointed. We'll see how it goes. Okay, so talking about the Bay Bridge foundation demolition job, there were several phases of the job. I'm going to specifically talk about phase 2 today. I want to focus on our partnership with our other contractors, subs, our owner, and various agencies. We're going to talk a little bit about the background of the job and why it was necessary. Talk about the execution of the project. Show you some accomplishments that we're pretty proud of, and show you a video. Okay, so we'll start by talking about a partnership. So yeah, Jim mentioned it at last year's World Demolition Awards in Dublin. This job won the award for the collaboration in demolition category, and then ultimately the World Demolition Award. And so I would be remiss if I didn't recognize our partners here that made this job such a success. So as the contractor, the job was built by a joint venture between Kiewit Infrastructure West Company, which is my employer, and another marine contractor on the West Coast, Manson Construction, a company that we joint venture with quite a bit on a lot of jobs. Our client was the California Department of Transportation. The project ended up being a CMGC, so Construction Manager General Contractor project with Caltrans. One of the very first CMGC projects that they had done in the state, and it was really a demonstration project to see if that contract model would be successful within the state. Ultimately it was, and now Caltrans has unlimited capacity to do CMGC projects within the state. Some key subcontractors and partners on the job I want to recognize here. The first one would be Silverado Contractors. They were our mechanical demolition sub. Bluegrass Concrete Cutting. They were our wire saw sub. They came in second season and did some wire sawing for us. CDB Contract Drilling and Blasting. They were our blasting subcontractor out of Florida. Environmental Science Associates. They were our environmental subcontractor, as you can imagine, in the San Francisco Bay Area. Environmental constraints and concerns are a huge deal. And then of course Ventura Consulting Group, they were our partnering facilitator, and they deemed our team as a world-class team. I'm not going to go through this whole list, but just suffice it to say there were a ton of stakeholders on this project. There's a list of about 18 or so here, and the stakeholders outside of obviously the contractor and our client ranged from environmental agencies, both federal and state agencies, local municipalities, fire departments, the California Highway Patrol. Every one of these stakeholders had a vested interest in the project, and they were somebody that we needed to coordinate with continuously throughout the life of the job. Okay, so I want to give you just a little bit of background on why this job was necessary. So a little bit of give you an idea where we're working. So this is the San Francisco Bay. You can see San Francisco's in the background there. Golden Gate Bridge is kind of the top right. Behind it is the Pacific Ocean. There's the Bay Bridge goes from Oakland to San Francisco. There's a west span of the Bay Bridge, which you can kind of see on the left-hand side of the photo, and the Old Bay Bridge on the right side. The Old Bay Bridge east span has been replaced. It was built, the Caltrans built a new bridge and replaced the old one, and demolition of the old one that you see there is what I'm going to talk about. So the existing bridge was constructed in the 1930s. It was opened in 1936. It was a double-decker bridge. Originally it was one deck for traffic and one deck for trains. Ultimately it became a top deck going westbound, bottom deck going eastbound. Everything was going great until 1989 when the Loma Prieta earthquake happened. You guys might remember that. That was 30 years ago. In October of 1989, right during the World Series, the A's and the Giants were playing each other in Candlestick Park. Earthquake hit. This is what happened to the Bay Bridge. Major damage elsewhere throughout the area, but this is what happened to the Bay Bridge. So Caltrans decided they needed to replace the bridge. So here's the replacement. So there's the new Bay Bridge in 2013. Almost 30 years later, Caltrans opened up the new bridge. Instead of a double-decker, now it's two side-by-side bridges. So the new bridge is on the right-hand side in the picture. The old bridge is on the left-hand side. The old bridge is what's coming down. In 2014, right after the new bridge opened, Caltrans let out various contracts for demolition of the superstructure, which you can see here. And then from 2014 to 2019 was the demolition of the substructure and the foundations, which is where Kiewit Manson comes in. We ended up having 3 phases or 3 independent construction contracts to do the demolition. I'm going to talk about phase 2. So this is just a chart to kind of show you. We actually had 4 different contracts with Caltrans. The first was a pre-construction services contract where we were chosen on a qualifications basis. We worked with Caltrans on a per diem basis to help them get through the permitting process, to design the demolition, and work with all the agencies. I'm going to talk about phase 2, which happened in 2016 and 17. It was the demolition of 15 piers. So here's what we did. This is a picture of the old bridge, obviously before all of the superstructure was gone, but I just want to give you an idea. So the concrete substructure and foundations that you see below the superstructure, that's what we removed. Ended up being in this phase about 41,000 cubic yards of concrete, that reinforced concrete that was demolished and removed. All the piers varied. You can see in the foreground of the picture, there were short pedestals on a foundation, and as you look, kind of go to the background there, the bridge, the piers, the pedestals, get taller, and then you'll see some of the pedestals, they kind of drop off, they get shorter because the footings get much bigger and they're structural steel. So as I talk through it, you'll see the difference in some of these. So as I mentioned, working in the San Francisco Bay is a challenge. California is special, I'll say, and I'll leave it at that. But there's a lot of constraints to working there, and so when we signed the construction contract, there were no permits to go demolish these foundations. We had to work with Caltrans and the agencies to go out and get permits. When we finally did get permits, they said, okay, hey, you got certain constraints you can work within. For example, you can only work in the water, which really meant on the water. So any mechanical demolition, any work below the surface from June through November. You can only blast, if we ultimately ended up blasting, which we did, you can only blast from October 15th through November 30th. You can only blast 1 foundation at a time and a maximum of 7 per season. So what that meant is there were 15 piers, so if you can only do 7 per season, it was a 3-year job. And you can only blast at slack tide on a Saturday morning during daylight. So slack tide, the reason was to try to, when we did the blast, to try to minimize the amount of overpressure that was going out into the water. Saturday morning was when traffic on the New Bay Bridge was the least, and we shut down traffic on the bridge during the blast. And during daylight was so that all of our environmental monitors could see, visibly see the implosion area so that they could monitor for marine life. And then of course there were other restrictions. You couldn't do it during inclement weather or some of the local events that were happening. Okay, so there were various types of foundations and pedestals that we talked about. So this is one of them. So in some cases what we did was everything above the water level, essentially we demolished and took off site. Everything from about the water level down we blasted. So what this picture is this is one of the first piers that we demolished. We put we put excavators with concrete breakers and shears up on the foundation itself. You can see they're sitting on a temporary platform. The foundation itself, this particular one was cellular, had a very thin roof on it, and so it couldn't take the weight of the excavator, so we had to design a temporary platform for the excavators to sit on. You can see, even though eventually we were going to blast these foundations and all of the rubble from the foundations was going to go into the ocean, when we were doing the mechanical demolition above the water, nothing could go in the water. So we had to build containment, so we used flexi floats to build containment around the foundations to kind of catch everything so it wouldn't go in the water. This is a different type of pier, so these are some of those big tall pedestals that we used. In this case, we had excavators sitting on barges, and so they were, because the foundations weren't big enough for the excavators, so we had them sitting on barges, again containing the material to keep it from going in the water. This is one of the bigger foundations. So this was constructed as a cellular caisson. So what happened is when they built this in the 30s, they essentially built a concrete structure and they sunk it. So as they added concrete to the top of it, they sunk it down into the mud, excavated the mud out from underneath, and continued to sink it down to the elevation that they needed to. So in this case, we were only required to remove the concrete to mudline, which was about 50 foot of water. So below mudline, the structure stayed in place, but it was still this open cellular caisson. So all of the demolition material we put into the cells in the caisson, and they ended up being entombed. The material ended up being entombed below the mudline, below the bay. So this is a picture of, we're working on the walls, working down, and all the material was going into those open cells that you see. Okay, so I told you it was a 3-season job. Well, at the beginning of season 2, Caltrans came to us and said, hey, we'd really like you to get this job done this year. We don't want to go into a 3rd season. We'd really like to be done in 2 seasons. We said, well, we could physically do that if we could get rid of some of these constraints that we had, right? I talked about before. And so we worked with the agencies, and everyone agreed that it was in the public's best interest, in Caltrans' best interest, to get done and get off the job. So we said, well, what can we do? Well, we still had this in-water work period that started June 1st, where we couldn't start any mechanical demolition until then. Well, we switched to wire sawing then. Wire sawing allowed us, on the pedestals, allowed us to start before June 1st. And so what we did was we accelerated the schedule by being able to start before June 1st. So we brought in a different subcontractor and started wire sawing the pedestals. Cut them into blocks, loaded them onto barges, took them off site, and processed them off site. So you can imagine there's 15 piers out in the middle of San Francisco Bay. Every one of them is an island, so logistics, just getting to it, was a challenge, right? So there's a lot of support that was required for the demolition activities. This activity shows the excavators there on the piers doing demolition. There's other excavators on barges right next to it. We had a crane at every pier supporting the demolition effort, and then other barges with other equipment, and ultimately taking the material that had to be taken away, we took it away. So there's a lot of support there. So once we got all the pedestals removed, then we started drilling for the explosives. You can see in this pier, the pedestals were on the corner. They've been demolished, and now we've got free reign to drill and start loading our explosives. Obviously, quality control, I'm sure Fabio can attest to this, on anything like this was huge, right? So once we got all the explosives loaded, there was a huge quality control check before anything ever happened to make sure everything was right in place. Okay, so on blast day, so now we finally got to the point where we're ready to blast, and we've got about 100 people from all of those various agencies and stakeholders that want to be involved in the blast in one way or another. And so how do you coordinate all those people? So this is a picture from the morning of blast day. Hey, we're about 3 hours before the blast, and we're making sure everything is in place before we go. But even prior to this, the day before or days before, we would have dry runs on the blast with every agency, every person that's in a boat somewhere, the security guards, California Highway Patrol, everyone that was involved. We had dry runs before the blast ever happened. This was part of a plan. I know you probably can't read it, but my point in showing this is we had a detailed plan on how the blast was going to go down, where everyone was going to be. You can see in this photo, shows the safe zone, shows where the California Highway Patrol boats were going to be to secure the area, shows where all the staging areas were. We had marine mammal buoys that were pingers to scare the sea lions and the seals away, where all those were going to be, where all of our monitoring equipment was. So we had a very detailed plan, and this was what we reviewed at our dry run. Hey, is everything in place? Is everyone ready to go? On top of that, we had an organization chart. Up at the top of the chart is our blasts are in charge. But all these 100 people that are involved in the blast on blast day have something to say or have something they're responsible for. There's a bird guy. Hey, are all the birds gone? There's the marine mammal people. Are all the marine mammals out of the way? Are all the safety things in place? Is the public secure? There's a trans-bay tunnel near the job for the BART, which is the Bay Area Rapid Transit subway. right? Has the subway been shut down for the blast? Has California Highway Patrol put the stop on traffic? So all of those things had to come into place and get back up to the blaster in charge and say, okay, we're ready to go, make it happen. Again, I know you can't read this, but this was a minute-by-minute schedule that we had for the day that we reviewed in the morning. Here's what's going to happen at 8:59. Here's what's going to happen at 9:02. Every minute of the day was planned. Okay, so now we've gone through all the planning. Everything is in place. We're ready to do the blast. So the biggest thing about the blast is what we call our blast attenuation system. I'll call it a bubble curtain for short. Basically, it was a ring of bubbles that we put in the water around every pier, and the idea was these air bubbles would reduce the amount of overpressure from the blast that was going out into the bay to try to protect marine life. So this picture just shows, in this case we were blasting 3 piers. We had barges between all the piers that were spudded down, air compressors on the piers, feeding these bubble curtains that were underwater. This is a picture of an example of a bubble curtain. Basically, it's a steel frame with perforated PVC pipe on it. You sink this, or not sink it, you set this steel frame on the bay bottom, hook up an air hose to it, and you ring the entire foundation with these steel frames, and you blow bubbles. That's what it looks like before you blast it with the bubble curtains going. Again, you can see the barges in place with compressors on them. We would test this system, several days before to make sure that all the rings were working, all the bubbles were blowing. You could easily see if there was a segment that wasn't working because there'd be a gap in the bubbles. Then we'd start up the bubbles, a couple hours before the blast to make sure everything was good. We had spare compressors on the barges in case something went wrong. On blast day, we could switch over a compressor and keep going. Picture the same thing. This is just multiple piers. This picture also shows you on blast day we had debris booms in place so that it would capture, when we did the blast, some of the material would float. The wood, we used wood mats for blast mats. The wood mats would float. The debris boom would keep it in place so it wouldn't float away. And there's another picture of kind of what it looked like on blast day. There was a bit of a delay between, the multiple piers that we were blasting. There's a triple. There's a triple. I don't have much else to say. I just like the picture. I think it's cool. You can see in the background there's other boats. California Highway Patrol's out there in boats keeping the public away. You can see various buoys going out in strings along the blast zone. Again, those were all environmental monitoring or deterrence. After the blast, we did some fish studies to see what the effects of the blast were on the wildlife. We actually put fish in cages at various radiuses throughout, away from the blast, inside the bubble curtain and outside the bubble curtain. We went after the blast and gathered up the fish and did autopsies on all the fish to see what the effect of the blast were on the fish. I'm happy to say every single fish outside of the bubble curtains, there was no effect whatsoever other than they were killed in the autopsy. But the fish inside the bubble curtains were killed, yes, but we kind of knew that, but it was really to test the effectiveness of the bubble curtain, and so this proved that it worked. So it was good news. So after the blast, and after we gathered up all the fish, and we'd come in and bring our support equipment in and clean up all the floating debris, get it out of there. And then we had to remove the material that was above the mud line. So in some cases, like I said, we had these cellular caissons. The material fell into the caissons and it was just entombed forever. In other cases, we just had to remove the material that was above the existing mud line. And so that's what we're doing here. We'd load it onto barges, take it to another facility, sort it. Here you can see wood, concrete, mud, rebar, all being sorted for recycling. And then I thought this was interesting. So one of the ideas, all of these piers, since the bridge was opened in 1936, had the bay bottom had scoured around the piers just from the action of the current and the tides. And so you can kind of see that, and these are hydrographic underwater surveys. And so you can kind of see where they've scoured. So the picture in the top left is the existing pier, the hydrographic survey with the pier in place before we blasted it. So you can see where it's kind of blue around the pier. It had kind of scoured over time around that pier. The next picture on the top right is what it looked like after we blasted it. So you can see it's red, you know, it's mounded up, right? So that's all the demolition debris, rubble that had blasted and been mounded up. So our job was to remove it back down to that scour line. So on the bottom left, that's what it looked like after we went in with our clamshell dredge and dug out the demolition material down to the scour line. So you can kind of see the pock marks from the clamshell in the mud. And then the bottom right-hand picture is what that same site looked like a year later. So the idea was that, hey, anything below the mud line eventually is going to get covered up by Mother Nature, just by the tidal action and silt and sediment. And you can see even after a year, all those pock marks that were kind of pretty precise and detailed, you can see in the previous picture, are starting to kind of get filled in. So it's it's happening exactly how we expected it to happen. It's starting to get filled in. Okay, so we're pretty proud of this job. I just want to talk about a few accomplishments and then I'll show a video. So first and foremost, most importantly, I told you we've been working on some phase of this project for 5 years. And we've worked every single day of that 5-year project, almost 1,500 days, without a single recordable incident. We're pretty darn proud of that, and that's a big deal to us. Schedule and costs, I talked about, you know, we ultimately were able to finish the job a year early by a combination of starting the wire sawing that I talked about. We were able to start that earlier, which helped us accelerate the schedule. We were able to convince the client or the agencies to allow us to open up the blast window so we could blast a longer period other than just 6 weeks a year. And then we ultimately convinced them to allow us to blast more than one period of time, which you saw in the pictures. So it resulted in, we finished a year early, and Caltrans ended up saving about $28 million in overhead costs. And through the CMGC process, we could show that we saved them about $119 million through innovation. There was a bunch of existing structures nearby, the new bridge, an old torpedo building on the island, the subway tunnel, some utilities. We did all this blasting and demolition without harming any of those structures. As I said, we proved we did not harm any fish species, marine mammals, anything that lives in the bay. And the bay was restored to its original condition, or it's in the process of being restored to its original condition. And then we're pretty proud of the awards this job has won. I talked about the World Demolition Awards. The job won the Marvin M. Black Excellence Award, which is a big deal from the AGC here in the US. So a lot of the awards are related to partnering and collaboration, which was a big deal to us. And I would tell you, second behind safety, the biggest accomplishment that we had was we built a long-lasting, trusting relationship with our client, with our subcontractors, and with all the stakeholders. And you know, we've really all become friends, and I can tell you that we trust each other, and we're going to hopefully work together again in the future. All right, so now I got a video. I thought it was pretty cool. It's kind of got some hokey music in it, so forget the music. How do you like the music? Good stuff, right?
Great presentation. And by the way, I was in the gym at the hotel here this morning at about 5. I didn't see many of you out there. But I heard that song playing and I looked around and there was Greg.
It's kind of catchy, right?
Yeah, he was working out to it this morning. So a couple things. Any questions real quick, because we are running behind and we don't want to miss out on anything. Yes, Mahesh?
Any constraints for wire sawing? No, and it was really based on noise, right? So as long as there was no noise with the wire sawing, so that's why we were able to start at any time with wire sawing. Obviously, we had to capture the slurry and the water from it, which we were able to do. You couldn't let that run off into the bay, but other than that, no.
Is that another question? Got one.
Good.
Yes, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Since you were able to save the 1 year and obviously a tremendous amount of money, was the owner generous in letting you guys take some of that savings?
Yeah, so it was a negotiated contract with Caltrans because it was a CMGC. So we were able to keep our original budget for the project, and then Caltrans saved on an entire year of overhead and project outlay. So obviously we had acceleration costs. So whatever acceleration that we could do within our original budget was up to us.
Okay, so as I mentioned, we're running a bit late, but I wanted to do two things. One is, I think it's clear to everybody why this was the 2018 Best of All Demolition Award projects. And let's give Greg a round of applause for his great presentation.